Thank you very much, and just a word to say that I'm really delighted to be presenting this preliminary findings of the report together with Raffaello. We are covering a very large range of issues, and hopefully your feedback will help us as well, prioritize what is important, what is not, and this is really why we are here. Let me follow on what, the big picture that Raffaello was presenting, and have some deep dives into just some few issues that we all know are so critical because they are the base for the livelihoods of the people who are living in the Drylands. Here we will be looking at, some key productive areas, as Raffaello was saying, livestock, agriculture, forestry, and maybe, in some public policies as well as, how to bridge maybe the human development gap, which is so huge in the Drylands as compared to the, let's say, the mainstream of the average of the people in the same countries, but also to look into some more softer issues like governance of natural resources and so on. Livestock. This is basically another translation of the map that Raffaello was presenting earlier on. You can see here, this is basically this index of feed deficit. So with no intervention, the historical trend, we're at 100, this is the index. With no intervention, but with the natural growth in the herds and simulation of 2 droughts, you have, the index increasing to 180. This means just more pressure on the feed resources. If you improve the animal health, with the usual package, you make it even higher, more than 200. If you just test how the offtake cattle of males and the health, 2 packages here, you will reduce it, but it is still quite high. And if you have only the early offtake of cattle males, this is what you get, which is something in the range of 160. So it is still higher, pressure, much higher pressure. 2 lessons from this one. I think the first one is that there is no one package to solve those problems. So you need to go by health and by better managing your herd and by better feeding it and looking at the productivity and the genetics and so on. And the second message is that mobility is key in order not to fuel, the conflicts that go with higher pressures. There is a considerable scope as well for developing irrigation. Here I can see, some faces from IFPRI who have been working on these issues. About 60% of the potential for irrigation is in the Drylands in East and West Africa. And 85% is actually small-scale irrigation. So, the dream that, sometimes we have, because water in the Drylands is like a dream, because you can see paradise, is, we have to get it to be reduced, that it is still, a high potential, but there are some critical issues. One of them is the governance of land and water and the relationship with pastoralism. The second one is the distributional effects, whether the benefits of irrigation accrue to the groups who are actually, the local people in those lands. But overall, the absorptive capacity of irrigation in terms of numbers of farmers is quite limited, and, it varies from, the very optimistic scenarios, more than 10-15%, to the basically the more realistic scenarios, which are in the range of 3 to 6%. So this is just another translation of the figures before in terms of mapped in the Horn of Africa. So just for you, all what is red is is large scale, and all what is blue and green is is small scale. Other than irrigation, rain-fed agriculture has as well huge potential. I don't know if you can read the small graph over there, but it shows that it compares the grain production with the wheat or maize in Australia, in Victoria, Australia, in the US and Nebraska for wheat, and Kenya. So Kenya is the yellow one, and you can see that really whether in the dryland part, which is less than 500 millimeters, or beyond that, there is really potential if you compare the yields to what is the situation in Australia or the US. Prospects for intensification of the drylands cropping systems include improved varieties, crop management technologies, crop livestock systems, a lot of what we know about climate smart agriculture as well. Tree-based production systems are technically feasible and economically sound. I think most of us know about the experiences that are now, up to a certain scale in the Sahel with the regreening initiatives based on the local knowledge of the water and soil techniques and technologies. Like the tassas, the demi-lunes, and actually, when you look at the economics of it, whatever is the discount rate, it is still, very, very profitable. The issue is that, those investments do not, yield to benefits immediately, but they take some time. Integration of markets and promotion of trade. The first, there are two maps, one in the west and one in the east. The one in the west is very interesting. It is basically about, staple food and the potential they have if two types of barriers to trade were reduced. One of them is infrastructure, and most of that infrastructure is the last mile infrastructure. Basically, it's just for the farmer to get their produce, to the very primary market. And the second one is more about the regulation, and here it's the access to the Nigeria market, for example, and you can see that actually the potential is much more than what is the current situation. For trade of livestock products as well, these are many arrows there just to show that there is a lot of movement and of flows. But basically, the livestock-based products, whether meat or milk, are in high demand and will be in higher demand in the future due to urbanization and due to the demand for export, mostly in the Gulf countries here. So the livestock has a bright future if you look at those big picture options. Landscape approaches bring multiple benefits. My colleague Steve will talk about this in much more depth here, but I think it is one of the ways forward, in terms of how you integrate your investments and your policies, because it does have an effect on productivity, higher resilience to climate, carbon sequestration, and so on. And finally, one of the major ways forward is, to build strong social protection systems to address the needs of the drylands, and mostly to target those very poor people and those who are at risk. So there is currently, some very good experiences. I think the experience of Ethiopia, there is a separate side event on it. So there has been this morning, actually. Kenya, Niger are scaling up safety nets. These countries provide, examples to many others in the Sahel and the Horn of Africa. So the idea is to move that, up the, let's say, the knowledge and the investment ladder, which is to bring in then more innovative insurance products, including those used in weather-based indexes, and also to make those social safety nets much more related to the productive assets with labor programs to support the shift to more productive and alternative livelihoods. Just one table here looking at the costs of the safety nets as compared to the cost of humanitarian response here. And I mean, I'm not going to read through the figures, but it is much more cost effective in many ways. However, reorienting existing spending on humanitarian, on general food distribution to, build really strong cash transfer systems is something that needs some political commitments. We all know that. In terms of the policy implications, what is really emerging from this work is that the next generation of resilience policies will need to be a combination of a number of options. One of them is, the critical one is to increase coping capacity of the most vulnerable, just social protection system, but also to improve or to enhance the social capital of the communities. To reduce the sensitivity to shocks, and this is basically the productive core of the investments. Markets integration, small-scale irrigation, more resilient pastoral livelihoods, rain-fed, all those the elements that we have just spoke about, and with the soft part, which is to look at the governance of the natural resource mechanisms, because this is so key for in the pastoral areas. Reducing the exposure by creating opportunities for rural non-farm livelihoods, increase employment opportunities outside of agriculture. I think this is, the more the inter-sectoral diversification that is required. And here, the issues of human development, of education, especially, is key in order to provide people, more options in terms of their diversification of livelihoods. The mix of interventions would need to be defined or refined on a country-by-country basis, depending on the current livelihoods patterns, but also, how these patterns will be influenced by the key drivers as demography or an economic transformation and climate change. Of course, the countries do not grow in the same way. They don't have the same political, economic, and social conditions. So this is just, a kind of very rough table to see, depending on the types of livelihoods, pastoral, agro-pastoral, and crop farmers, how the efforts should be made in terms of increasing the coping capacity, reducing the sensitivity, or reducing the exposure. So depending on the livelihoods, the combination is rather different. Other emerging insights touch more upon, the human, social, and political dimensions of resilience. I think, bridging the human development divide, water, health, education, conflict, with investments in education being a powerful enabler of change in the longer run. So when you look at the figures, for example, in some nomadic areas, and it is the enrollment rate of the kids is about 12%, while in on average in the same countries it's about 80 to 90%. Then there is a big divide, and I think one key message is to try to bridge that divide as much as possible in order to build a better generation. The pastoral economy is one key area. I think the governance of pastoral natural resources, and here the issue of mobility, that has to be looked at not only at the country level but at the regional level, because basically the flows of animals and people with them, and the markets are regional. And here I think the regional integration communities have a key role to play. Define suitable location-specific mixes of improved animal health. Here again, I think this is just that the clear understanding that there is not one simple solution to that, and in order to improve your productivity, you have to work on those fronts, and it's not a choice. I think it's a necessity there. Regional integration and action to increase trade of food and livestock-based stuffs, improve governance of pastoral and natural resources, just spoken about that. But also in order to better coordinate investments cross-boundary, across the boundaries, so that, for example, you coordinate your investment along trade routes or along, so that you make sure that you don't duplicate. So if you are building a animal health facility on this side of the boundaries, you don't need to do it on the other side. The same for markets, the same for so many facilities, and that requires as well a strong, regional coordination and integration. Enhance the social cohesion by strengthening community social capital and targeting the most vulnerable. And finally, I think, we going through this exercise, we realize that, there is so much to be learned. So improving the knowledge base, and this is the place, I think, to say these nice things. The last slide is about the timelines for this work. We are more or less, in May. So there has been so many steps. Each, let's say, chapter or section of the report has had, some seminars in order to exchange and to get as much as possible knowledge and wisdom from stakeholders. The preparation of the full report is in the coming months. The internal review and decisions will be in the autumn, and hopefully in the winter 14-15, the report will be launched here in Africa. Thank you very much.